Hey, Los Angeles, what's up, Ramley? Welcome into the Rams Skinny here on the LA Football Network. Rough game we got to talk about. We're not going to spend a ton of time on it. We're going to go more big picture here as the Rams fall 20-3 to the Green Bay Packers up in a rainy Lambeau Field. But before we get into it, as always, my good friend here, managing editor, beat writer for the Rams, Ryan Skinny T. Anderson. What's up, brother? Happy Monday. How we doing?
Doing okay, man. Tough loss. Probably maybe one of the worst losses of the McVay era. One of those winnable games that slips through the fingers. But we were just talking about it. I got out, had a nice cleansing run in Debs Park near my house here in Los Angeles, and shaking out the sadness and the sillies, and now we're back to our professional selves, talking football. How are you doing?
I'm good. I was just going to say, hopefully McVay and company got a nice run in a park this morning as well to get the sadness and sillies out and refresh and go into the bye week with some clear thoughts of how to get things going. But no, I'm good. Everything's good. Busy weekend. Always is. Our LA teams. Chargers play tonight. So we got Chargers coverage coming for you. Not that the Rams fans probably care, but if anyone's in here that's a Chargers fan randomly watching our show, stuff with that. USC yesterday fired Alex Grinch, so that was a huge story we were on, and I'll be at a USC practice later today for Lincoln Riley's interview press conference, which I'm sure will be either very interesting or very dull and scripted and not much out of it. So we'll see what that looks like. But all good here. One minor funny story for you. About fatherhood or parenthood, I should say. So just randomly, so I don't know why you'll learn with little kids that they pick up things out of nowhere and you have no idea why or what. So Mia had like a I don't want to call it a scratch, but I guess like a scab, like a minor like cut on her leg. And she's in that phase, like any boo-boo she has, she wants a Band-Aid. Like, doesn't matter if it's a bruise, if it's a scrape, whatever, she wants a Band-Aid. And so finally we're like, all right. So yesterday we put a Band-Aid on her knee. And then all of a sudden, because she has a Band-Aid now, her leg is like decapitated. Like she can't walk anymore. So she's literally like been for the last 24 hours, like scooting around our house on her butt and like not walking because she's like, no, I have a boo-boo. I'm like, you were literally walking fine yesterday before, but it's kids. They're funny. So anyway, just felt like that maybe could brighten someone's day hearing that after this Rams loss.
That's absolutely adorable.
Yeah. So if you happen to come over or if we see each other soon, maybe you'll see her scooting around on her booty all over the place. But before we get into Rams talk, got to talk about our friends at Underdog Fantasy. Head to UnderdogFantasy.com or download the Underdog Fantasy app in the App Store or Google Play. Use our promo code RAMSLAFB, all one word, Rams LAFB. It's going to get you a match deposit bonus up to $500. So you put $100 in, you get $100 free dollars to play with, all the way up to $500. Tons of fun. Some of our guys on the network, I don't know if you saw in the Slack chat, had some success this weekend. With some big payouts. So how it works, you can play fantasy or the pick'em is, I think, what the main hot commodity is. You pick 2 to 5 players within any sport, and you're basically just choosing against the the spreads, I guess, that Underdog creates. So for tonight, for instance, Justin Herbert, if he has over or under 280 yards passing, you pick over or under, and if it hits, it hits. So ton of fun. Underdog Fantasy, Rams LAFB is the promo code. Tell them the guys at the Rams Skinny sent you there. And good luck. 20-3, Skinny T. The offense never showed up. We talked about it a lot, obviously, in our preview show, and I think there was some confidence, not necessarily because Brett Rippon is, a great backup quarterback, but just because this is not a very good Packers team. So we thought, okay, there's some good enough stuff for this Rams team to do. So let me ask you this off the top before we kind of dive a little deeper, and then we'll go big picture. Was this a game in your summation where we truly saw a massive talent gap? We kind of talked about this in the Eagles game, but you figure, no Matthew Stafford, no Kyren Williams. There's some injuries elsewhere. Was it a huge talent gap, or is this just a team that is not currently well coached, is just going through the motions? Like, what was your overall summation of this really poor game against not a very good Packers team?
Heading into it, we our scores were pretty close, low scoring game, and not a huge gap between the two teams score wise. And you think about if you take Stafford off there, you take Havenstein out, you take your starting running back, and then your backup running back out, and those kinds of injuries, that shows you the massive drop off of talent from the starters to the second string and the third stringers on this team. So not only do the Rams go into games against, say, the Eagles with a talent gap when they face some of the attrition from injuries that you're gonna have these kinds of injuries over the length of a season. That just exposes it to an even greater degree. And we'll get into the big picture later on, but that just shows you, that they have to address some of these things in the offseason as well. They're going to have to get a linebacker behind Ernest Jones, just in case that when and if he gets bumped and bruised, over the next couple of seasons. So they've got a lot of work to do. And there were some big variance plays, some turnovers that happened that had the Rams been able to capitalize on those things, they would have been in this game much more so. It's go through the league, 32 teams. How many of them have a starting quarterback that can go out there and win them a game? It's there's just not a lot of them out there. There's probably, I don't know, 20 good quarterbacks in the league, and then there's
maybe even less now with all the injuries stacking up.
Yeah, and there's a handful of serviceable guys once you get past that starting realm. You look at the New York Jets who are playing tonight. They lose Aaron Rodgers. I've spent so much time thinking about Aaron Jones. Aaron Rodgers,
former teammate.
Yeah. Aaron Rodgers goes out. Zach Wilson comes in. Well, he's a first round, second pick overall quarterback from just a few years ago. He's not maybe not the most talented guy out there, but he's not Brett Rippon, that's for sure. So, there's just not that many good backup quarterbacks. There's not enough starting quarterbacks to go around in this league, and to expect that a backup's going to come in and just win this game. There could have been some favors done. The weather didn't do them any favors. Mm-hmm. The running game didn't do him any favors, and he's I think he missed some receivers, he missed some throws, and that's just what's going to happen when Brett Rippon is your quarterback.
Yeah, it's if I'm being, I guess I'll put my negative hat and critical hat on first. It just goes into what we've been saying, and a lot of people have been saying is, this regime with McVay and Les Snead, for whatever reason, has not put any emphasis on having a serviceable backup quarterback. And I think that reared its ugly head yet again. And Rippon, this is his fourth season. He was with the Broncos before, so he's not necessarily a nobody. But, and I'm not even saying at the trade deadline, but going into this season, knowing Stafford was coming off of a big injury where he missed the entire rest of the season, knowing his age, knowing his history and track record. And I get it. This is a remodel year, so I don't think that was obviously not top priority, but you can still get a serviceable backup for, pretty cheap dollars that give you a better chance to win than what we saw on Sunday. And, unfortunately that just hasn't been, and it hasn't been an emphasis ever, even in their Super Bowl years. I mean, they've always had, obviously the John Walford as backups for many years. They had, Bryce Perkins as a third stringer, but it's just the good teams you see and usually have someone that can come in and at least, run the offense capably. I mean, we look at the Indianapolis Colts, they use their first overall pick or their fourth overall pick, but first round pick, Anthony Richardson, he goes down. Gardner Minshew's won them some football games, or at least kept them very competitive. And I think that was a really good pickup by him. You look at, obviously we've talked about before the Eagles when they lost Carson Wentz that year and they have Nick Foles, it leads them to a Super Bowl. And, it's tough to do, but I think there has to be more of an emphasis. And it goes back to drafting, right? Like I think they drafted Stetson Bennett with that thought in mind. And obviously he's had his own off the field issues that have kept him from that role. But you look at the quarterbacks they passed on or had the opportunity instead of it, regardless of Stetson Bennett's off the field stuff. I don't think there was many people thinking he was the correct choice just in terms of quarterback intangibles based on what he did in college, based on who was available. So it's a situation they kind of put themselves in. I still think they could have done a little better in this one. I mean, 3 points is, coming from an offensive mind in Sean McVay, and you still have Cooper Kupp out there. You still have Puka Nacua, who's been great, obviously. They made their bed and now they got to sleep in it. And unfortunately, it's a 3-6 football team.
Yeah, absolutely. To me, I think it's a chicken or the egg situation. I tend to blame the Jimmies and the Joes rather than the X's and the O's in this particular situation. Just because you got to go out there and you got to execute and you got to make the plays. And Sean McVay in his press conference is always going to fall on his own sword and take on the responsibility for the loss, which is what he should do. Mm-hmm. But what do you think of these calls for Sean McVay's head coming out from the likes of, let's say Samuel L. Jackson? He didn't really call for his head. Exactly.
Time to have a conversation, right?
That was a conversation. Yeah. You and I think we're on the same page as, Sean McVay is one of the better head coaches in the league, probably if we're ranking him top 5 somewhere in that realm. But what do you think of those calls? Is it, what is the answer at the top of the food chain there?
Well, the answer is no. Undoubtedly no. McVay is still one of the best coaches, and as frustrating as it can be for fans seeing some play design and play call and getting out of his own way, and he's like any coach, makes mistakes and isn't perfect, and we've talked about a lot. Like, we're definitely critical, but we give him his flowers too. But I mean, the answer is no. He would be hired. I think teams would fire their coach to hire McVay if he was on the streets instantly if he was still wanting to be in coaching. So I think what everyone needs to remember here, and then I will get into some kind of the critical talk, but what everyone needs to remember here is this year, the expectation was not high for this team, but then based on how they were able to perform early on in the season, then the expectation grew into, wow, we can really do something. I don't think most people, I was definitely one of the higher ones. You were probably, I wouldn't say lower, but lower than me. I think most people look at the schedule and 3-6 was probably, yeah, that seems like what this football team is going to be based on everything that happened in the offseason. Going into the bye, 3-6, maybe 4-5, 1-8 wasn't inconceivable based on the talent and based on the schedule. So it's not like they're a Super Bowl contender that is 3-6 because of horrible coaching. This is a talent deficient roster that is in a remodel year. They went into a tough place that they haven't won at in Lambeau with a backup quarterback, backup running back, backup right tackle, and no best defensive player outside of Aaron Donald and Ernest Jones. And so, they had injuries. The offense couldn't do anything. I thought the defense still battled. Green Bay was given some short fields on turnovers, and they still battled and only gave up 20 points. It wasn't like Green Bay, offense dominated. So McVay's got these guys playing. It seems like there's still a will to improve and develop talent, which I think is important. Has he made mistakes? Has there been poor play calling? Has there been deficiencies in him and his coaching staff? Yeah, of course, absolutely. But based on what this roster is, I don't think anyone is calling for one of the best coaches we've seen in the modern era to get fired because of I mean, what coach out there is winning 5 games with this roster right now? Skinny T. I mean, I name a coach that comes in here with Brett Rippon, Royce Freeman, and all these other backups and is going to win games for you. I mean, let's be critical of Coach McVay and yeah, but people calling for firing, you're just reactionary and silly, to be honest.
Yeah. And so much of the fan perspective, and I don't want to crap on fans. I'm a fan of sports myself, and I have these thoughts all the time. But we, as fans, we always have to remember not to be so hyperbolic and out of control in these down times. And you got to think about you can't think in terms of hypotheticals. You got to think in reality. And it's like you were saying, who better out there? Who's coming in and making this happen? And I would go so far as to say with the quarterback is, Matthew Stafford is a really, really, really good quarterback. He's fantastic out there. Mm-hmm. He was having a fantastic season. And, any backup coming in, I'll just say it again, any backup coming in isn't going to perform as well as a top 5, or so, let's say top 5, top 10 type of quarterback. Mm-hmm. And there's definitely some points left on the board, and there's some execution things. Those turnover, coming off those turnovers with great field position, you got to put some points on the board there.
Yep.
But you got to I was thinking about it this morning. You got to kind of contrast this team to a Raiders team who just fired their coach, moved on from all sorts of people at the top there. And, you look at what a disarray and just how unhappy those guys were under the McDaniels way, the Belichick way on the West Coast. Yeah, I guess Las Vegas. But they were just so unhappy there. They're smoking cigars in the locker room and playing basketball and putting up 27 points and taking themselves to a victory after their head coach was fired. And you look at, just how much better coached this Rams team has been. Probably, on the defensive side, it's very easy to compare because you got Max Crosby and a bunch of other guys on their team. And the way that the Rams have been seen as Aaron Donald and a bunch of other guys on their team. And a bunch of those other guys on the Rams team have really stepped up and performed really well. You think about Cobie Durant, you think about Jordan Fuller, forcing another fumble today, just another heads up play from Akhello Witherspoon. Byron Young looks like he's a contributor, edge rusher. Kobie Turner up there on the defensive line, having himself another really good day. And you can't say that about a Raiders team. So if you're a fan out there of the Rams, just look over there to you probably got a Raiders fan in your life. Just go, say what's up to those guys and talk about how much better it is to be a Rams fan today than it is to be, a Rams fan it is in general than it is a Raiders fan.
Yeah. It's not an organization in disarray. It's a team that hasn't been playing well. It's a team that's quite frankly probably just not a very good football team in 2023, but it's a well-oiled, well-run machine that is going to get back on track. And I think if everyone remembers what the expectation was and can kind of, put the pitchforks down for a second and say, okay, let's just see. And this is where we can kind of turn the conversation now, Skinny T, is let's just see what improvements can be made over the final. What do we got left? 9 games, I think. Yeah, 9 games left. Or 8 games left. Thank you. 8 games left, and see kind of what happens and how we build towards next season. And before I ask my question, and going into this kind of bye week and what they're able to do. One positive I want to say that we've seen through 9 games is that I think we can say it's early, but I think we can say that this current draft class is looking like one of the better ones of the Leslie McVay era, which was a must, right? Going into this year, it was like, okay, if they're going to kind of tear it down, remodel, and plan for the future, they got to hit on this draft class. And, you got to give it more than just 9 games. It's got to be a couple seasons to where you truly see. But obviously, I think Steve Avila looks like a home run. I think Kobie Turner looks like, as you mentioned, very good. Byron Young, who was very raw, coming in at a starter and, still has a lot of way to go, but is looking like a very comparable player. And we're seeing other guys contribute. Obviously, Puka Nacua has been phenomenal. So I think overall, that's the one positive of this fan base is that this 2023 draft class has looked really good so far. So your thoughts on that before moving into big picture?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. They absolutely needed this year, especially to hit, just because if you look back at some of their draft classes and kind of the whiffs that they've had, I'm just looking at it now, Logan Bruss, we'll see if he turns into anything. Derion Kendrick, we'll see if he makes it onto the team. Bobby Brown hurt. Robert Rochelle, is he still on the roster? I don't know. Jacob Harris, Ernest Brown, Jake Funk. Gone. Yeah. Cam Akers, Van Jefferson, Terrell Lewis, the 2020 class, which would be the outgoing, let's say, class of, graduating class, or I don't know how you'd want to put that, but, they rarely re-sign these guys. But, you go down that list, and a lot of misses, not a lot of hits, some hits out there. But, this year was critical, and looking ahead, at the draft that we're coming into, they have, high draft picks, but they also have 10 picks total, what they're looking at right now.
And they'll probably, I'm sure, knowing the Rams, they'll end up getting some more, whether it's draft day trades moving back, or whether it's, something else after the season, or I don't know if they're going to get many comp picks this year. They might get, what?
Well, I imagine they're going to be pretty active in picking up guys in free agency, so that'll eliminate. That'll kind of cancel some of those out. But exactly. I mean, I think these two draft classes are incredibly important.
So let me ask you this, and this is how we can turn this now. So looking over these 8 games, what do you think is more important? So right now the Rams sit with the 6th overall pick, I believe. I think it's 6th. It's top 8 for sure.
Yep.
I think it's probably wise for this team, depending on how the board falls, depending on how they fit. Matthew Stafford, if wanting to come back, which I believe he will, I think should be the starter next year. He's proven when healthy, he's still a very good quarterback. And so they're a dime a dozen. You don't just hit on a draft pick. But if you have a pick that high, I think it'd be wise to use it on a quarterback, and then he's able to sit for a year and ease into playing. Do you think it's at this point, and I don't even want to use the word tank. I know you wrote an article that I want you to talk about your article because it was phenomenal, but we don't need to use the word tank because I don't think the Rams have that in their DNA to tank. But from a fan perspective or an analyst perspective, do you think it's more wise at this point for the Rams to, how do I phrase this, play more of the younger guys that might behoove them to lose more to keep that higher draft pick? Or do you really want to see improvement over these 8 games and win as many games as possible, even if that means, finishing the season 7-9 or 7-10 and being in the teen range? What do you think?
Yeah, I think given what the Rams need from the draft, they don't need to lose a bunch of games to get into a better position. Now, looking ahead at the schedule, there's kind of some games that are going to be very difficult to escape with a win. If there's at this point, there's no reason to rush Matthew Stafford back. So if he's not ready to go, if he's not completely healthy, if that hand isn't completely healed heading into Seattle, I think we see another Brett Rippon game. That's a loss. You look at the great Browns defense. That's tough. The Ravens are playing like a Super
Bowl. Might be the best team in football right now. Yeah.
Yeah. Lamar Jackson MVP season is getting a lot of talk. San Francisco's always going to play them a tough game. So anyway, I think the most important thing, the paramount thing for this team to do is remain a competitive team in their own heads. Yep. Stafford is a competitive guy. He wants to go out there and win. Aaron Donald, obviously a competitor. Cooper Kupp wants to be out there. And then to me, and I wrote this in the article, is it's very important for young guys. They're looking to this team's leadership to NFL careers are incredibly short, less than 3 years, I think, less than 4 years for sure. And, some of these guys only have a couple of games to, live out their dreams, and they're looking to their coach, hey coach, put me in the right spot, teach me everything you got. They don't want to be a part of losing teams. They want to be winning teams. I was just talking about it with the Raiders. They were so excited to get to get rid of a coach, because now they got somebody that's putting them in the right positions, putting them in the position to win games, treating them like human beings and good football players, and all the things that just the human level of this game. These are 22, 23-year-old guys, a lot of this roster, and they're still kind of like coming into their own as human beings and as men, and they're learning from Raheem Morris, and they're learning from Coach McVay and everybody on this coaching staff. And that's just such an important part of a player's development, that they learn that winning culture, that kind of, never say die kind of culture, that you look over at the Raiders, and they just didn't have that for the first, weeks. We see that with like Damar Hamlin, for instance. These guys are putting their lives on the line for these coaches. They're putting their bodies out there. They're putting their futures out there for these coaches. And McVay's the kind of coach that inspires, guys to run through burning rooms for them, run through brick walls for this guy. And, once you lose that kind of commitment and that engagement with a guy, those young players, it's not like they can just quit and go find another job. They got to perform well. They got to look good if they're looking for another contract, or if they're going to be signed by this team again. It's a rough league, especially for a lot of the guys that are the caliber of player that are making up the Rams roster.
Yeah, exactly. It's so well said. And that's kind of what I was going to say too, is there's nothing that will sever a locker room more than knowing that your team is tanking for a draft pick. Because I can tell you this much. Every single player on this roster right now can give 2 Fs about next year's draft. Because guess what? Whoever's drafted next year is coming for their job. Yeah. And so they care about their job right now, this team right now, and what they can do to win every game possible. And, mathematically, they're not out of the playoffs. So if they happen to go on a run, I think it's very unlikely, but you never know if that can happen. But I get the fan sentiment, and I even get sometimes from the higher up sentiment. Like we've seen it, right? In Houston last year, when it was Lovie Smith said, nope, I'm not losing this game, and goes for 2. And there was this big talk of, wow, like he cost his team a higher draft pick. But the guys in that day in and day out, this coaching staff, this team, these players on this team, they're absolutely not playing. They're not thinking. They do not care about the 2024 draft, because those are guys coming for their job. And if you know from the higher up that that's what the goal of the organization is, there's nothing that can destroy your locker room more, I think, because you know that your team doesn't believe in you, your coach doesn't believe in you, your organization doesn't believe in you anymore, and you want to be replaced. And obviously that's not every single player. I don't think Aaron Donald has that worry, but a lot do. A lot have that fear. There's nothing more deflating or debilitating is what I'm looking for than no job security, right? In any job. Like if I know in whatever job I'm doing, if I have 0 job security, which, the NFL is probably one of the biggest job security list businesses out there because it's all performance based. However, if it's been said to me straight up, like, we don't value you in this job because we're planning for next season's draft, there's nothing that's going to hinder my performance more, because like, why am I putting my body in the line when I may not even be here next year based on what you're telling me right now? Like that can happen no matter what. You could not be here next year, but if you're all the writing's on the wall. So this whole tanking for a quarterback thing, A, it's not going to happen. B, it shouldn't happen. And so this team needs to go out, and I think that's what you need to see is improvement week over week, development of these young players, staying healthy. Do we know, like the big question, Skinny T, is do we know Matthew Stafford is going to be the quarterback next year? Is he playing still at a high level? Does he remain healthy? Is he fully in it? Which I think we can answer all those questions over these next 8 weeks. Those are the keys for this team moving forward. And if you can win 7-8 games and give yourself a shot, great. If it ends up being a 6-win team and you finish up with a 13, 14, 15th overall pick, guess what? I mean, this is a pretty deep quarterback class. Michael Penix Jr. might be there in those teen rounds. There's a lot of good QBs that I think will be available for this team that can maybe sit a year behind Stafford. So the thought of firing Sean McVay, the thought of tanking for a quarterback, None of those are going to happen, and none of those should be thoughts. Let's keep this moving forward and see how this team can improve over these final 8 games.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. He said it very succinctly and eloquently, and yeah, I think even if you go out there and you compete and you're trying to win every game, that pays dividends with those young guys, and they're not going to fall off, as if they would if you just benched, all of your veterans. You kept Brett Rippon in there, yeah, I think, you keep those kind of good feelings rolling when you can. We saw how excited the fan base got, and I think we saw how excited these players played when they were competitive in games that maybe they weren't in that winning that first game against Seattle just set a really nice tone. And, once Stafford is back, their chances of winning goes up exponentially just because he's that much better of a quarterback. And
Yep.
I went on a Green Bay Packers podcast earlier this week right before the game on Sunday. Actually, I was on with them, and I had actually changed my score prediction in favor of the Green Bay Packers once Ernest Jones went out, just because he's a huge piece of that defense. And Troy Reeder had himself a decent game. He didn't just fall flat on his face, but he's just not
Ernest Jones.
Yeah. He's coming back, and he's going to make that defense really good. And I actually thought the defense played really well. They just kind of got tired and deflated towards the end of the game when the offense wasn't able to stay on the field, give them some rest, and the Packers just kept putting up points and got themselves behind the 8 ball on that one. But they're going to be in some of these games. I'm going to say that the Seattle game, if Stafford is in, is a winnable game. I'm going to say that the last game of the year against the 49ers is a winnable game, just because they're divisional matches, and you got the Commanders, you got the Giants. Those are winnable games, and they can come out with 6-7 wins in this season. I think 8 or 9 is a real stretch. But the Browns don't have really offense to speak of at this point.
Yeah.
Who knows what's going to happen with their quarterback situation? So I'm still high on this team, and with Stafford in there and Ernest Jones coming back and Rob Havenstein.
Yep.
The less Joe Noteboom plays at this point, I think is I've been a defender of his. I'm finally out on Joe Noteboom. He's going to cost his team $20 million cap hit next year. I'll be surprised if he's on this team. But he's proven that he's not worth the contract that he signed.
Tony Pastor somewhere is like, Les, you got to stop doing this to me, man. Like, what are we're giving these numbers? Like, what are we doing here? This is not Monopoly money. Come on, throw me a bone.
Yeah,
throw me a bone.
So I'm still optimistic with Stafford at the quarterback. Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp. This is where we just came through a dark day, but guys, this is a good team. They're still that team that pushed a Bengals team to the brink. They took the Colts team to overtime and scored the winning touchdown. They were right there with the San Francisco 49ers for much of that game. This isn't as doom and gloom as it seems. They just have a bad backup quarterback. They're heading into the bye week limping. Absolutely. They do not look fantastic heading into it. This losing streak does not look great, but they're a better team than this losing streak actually shows. They would have been a playoff team had they picked up 1 or 2 of those 1-score games that they played in. And I wrote about that in my article as well. And it's like they were in some of those games, and they needed to do it. And that's why you and I were so critical of those games. It's like, this is a winnable game. This is a game they should have taken. And, now we're seeing why. Now we're seeing exactly why they need to win those games, because they're now really on the outside looking into the playoff picture. It would have been fun if they would have gotten to the playoffs. But even if they had gotten to the playoffs, hey, it's any given Sunday at that point. So
exactly. That was my thought in the offseason. So yeah, last thing I'll say, and then we can wrap this up, is, the one big nuance. I think that we'll see what McVay does during this bye week. Is it seems like, and I think Jordan Rodriguez, I haven't read the whole thing, so I don't want to speak on it specifically, but she wrote a piece kind of on adjustments and whatnot. So I don't want to get into that just because I haven't read it yet. But just from my watching, it definitely seems like McVay, and we talked about it a bunch earlier in the year about the second half performances by this Rams offense. And it seems like defenses have done a much better job at adjusting and schematically really giving this offense fits, whereas McVay and the offense hasn't been able to really adjust and find those inefficiencies in the defense like they have in years past. It's just for whatever reason, whether it's personnel, whether it's McVay just not quite finding what he needs to do, whatever it may be, that's the thing that I think is very correctable. That can be fixed, whether it's, again, from a personnel perspective, from an execution perspective, or just from a play call perspective. That's where this team is really lacking on offense, is just those adjustments and intangibles that it has made Sean McVay so great as an offensive mind and as a play caller. And we just haven't seen that. The offense has just looked so vanilla. And last week it's hard to really be critical when you have Brett Rippon as your quarterback. You kind of have to throw a lot out. But even in some of those games with Stafford, it just hasn't been the evolution of the offense we've seen in past years. So I think that's really what I want to see this bye week. If Stafford can't go, Rippon's been here long enough where you should be able to open the playbook up a little bit. You can't make every throw like Stafford can, but you can at least be more creative in getting your guys involved. And so that's, I think, the one thing we really need to see from Coach McVay to get back to that play calling thing, because as good as he's been, he struggled this year with play calling, but I think the big kind of like frustration for fans is for whatever reason, he just can't beat his own tree. Like, he cannot beat Kyle Shanahan. He cannot beat Matt LaFleur. Like, he struggles against his coaching tree, or his brethren, if you will, because I think they know what he's bringing, and he just doesn't change it up.
Well, and you look at the LaFleur specifically in this week, he ran the ball a lot. And he did it pretty successfully. I think, 4.5, 5 yards a clip, something like that. And he was really able to out physical this Rams team, and that is always McVay's kind of Achilles heel, so to speak, is that he always wants to out finesse rather than out physical. And, we saw in this game, we always talk about the running game. We can't not do a Rams skinny without talking about the running game for a little bit, at least. We saw some successful plays, even with the backups back up in. The bad thing was there was maybe, for every 2 positive plays, there was one really negative play where somehow the Green Bay Packers were just in the backfield, just destroying them. But when it comes down to just out physicaling another team, the Rams just have always had a really hard time. And that this is the way since McVay was hired in 2017, every single year, it seems like the league just keeps kind of getting a little bit more and more physical, getting a little bit more ground and pound, getting, moving back towards, big offensive linemen, big defensive linemen. The Fred Warner types are Fred Warner type is, you can't really say Fred Warner type, just kind of those more traditional.
Look at the Eagles offense. They're like your old school smash mouth offense with some nice aerial pieces, obviously, but that's kind of what's trending now.
Well, and you look at what they've invested in the draft just year over year, it's offensive linemen and defensive linemen, with the occasional wide receiver kind of sprinkled in there. And then they fill in the blanks with everything else, through free agency and whatnot and trades. But it's just, that's the evolution that McVay knows he needs to make. Now he just needs to make those play calls to reflect, what he wants to do, just by a physical side. And we've seen it, we saw it in the first few weeks of the season, but he really regresses to a very conservative play calling. And we saw some explosive plays from Rippon, even, Cooper Kupp caught 2 passes for 50 yards, 48 yards, I think,
Yeah.
And, we saw some, explosive plays. There just needs to be some more of that element. He needs to get out of his own way and believe in his players and believe that they're going to rise to the occasion, be physical, play some smash mouth football. And, when he's called on them to do that, for the most part, they've been able to do it. And he just doesn't want to call it all the time. I think, I don't know if it's necessarily a lack of belief in his players, but he just doesn't want necessarily always wants to put his players in that position to make the physical play.
Yeah. Yeah. And, just have some fun again, some fun play calling. We saw some stuff early in the year that was like, vintage McVay, and we haven't seen it in a long time. So there was a play in the USC Washington game that Lincoln Riley called that I don't even know what you would call it, a reverse flea flicker. But he look it up, or I'll send you a link because I don't know if you saw the game or not, but it was, it was an incredible play. I don't know if it'd work in the NFL against a good defense because Washington has a terrible defense also. But basically, Caleb Williams snapped it shotgun, immediately threw it out to Zachariah Branch as like a screen. And then Zach Branch kind of ran back invertedly like a bubble screen, but instead of cutting up, went back to Caleb, pitched it back to Caleb, and then Caleb hit Washington wide open down the sideline. It was like an absolutely beautiful play call that was so fun. Like, I want to see stuff like that from McVay. Like, let's do that with Tutu Atwell, or Tutu Atwell can be the seam guy going down the field, but let's do that with Puka Nacua or Cooper Kupp. You're going to draw the whole defense in. The thing is, will they have enough time to pull it off? But, just fun things like that. Get back to having some fun, make some good play calls, and kind of get out of your own way. So we'll see. We got the bye week. We'll still have a show for you on Thursdays, guys, as it won't be a preview show, but we'll talk more Rams football and what's kind of transpired throughout the week and maybe some more big picture stuff. But this was, fun still, even with the tough loss, 20-3 to the Packers. But we'll see how this team rebounds and gets back on track after the bye. So for Ryan Skinny T. Anderson, I am Ryan Dyrud. Thank you all for hanging out with us. Make sure to like and subscribe to the Rams LAFB YouTube channel, or follow us anywhere you get your podcast at Rams Skinny. LAFB Network are all of our social media handles, and obviously LAFBnetwork.com is the website. Everyone have a great week. We'll be back on Thursday. Be well, be safe. Talk to y'all soon.